Hi guys, how there everybody? I see there's some people coming into the classroom and some people leaving the classroom. So I'm just going to chat for a minute while we give everybody a chance just to join. I know often even the sessions that we have to take part in ourselves, sometimes it's difficult to get into the classroom on time. Things always seem to go wrong at the last minute. And then we will begin. So I am recording. So everything that we do this evening will be available in a recording, which I'll post for you tomorrow. And so if you miss anything or you want to go back over something, you'll be able to do that as well. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just begin slowly. We'll see if anybody else joins, otherwise the recording will be posted. So this is our NSS session for your second assignment, excuse me, which is, let me just quickly write down these, get the dates right. Yours is due on the 9th of October. So that is where are we now today, the 28th. So just over 10 days you've got left to go. I know I counted it as 2 weekends that you've got before the due date. So I have deliberately done the NSS a little bit earlier than we usually do. We usually do it a week before due date, but I thought let me do it a bit earlier, which gives you guys a little bit longer to work with all of the information that I give you and to work on the questions as well, because I think a week is not really enough, especially with the kind of assignments that you guys do. So you have got time, so no panicking. 2 weekends. I don't know, I always think of it in terms of weekends because obviously I don't know how many of you are working, but I know a lot of you are working, and I did a lot of studying when I was working, and I used to always think in terms of my exam prep and prep for assignments, always in terms of how many weekends have I got before the due date, because that's kind of how you tend to work if you are, especially if you work in full time. I don't know about how you guys tend to think of it. Okay, so I'm going to put the assignment document back on the screen in a minute, but I just quickly wanted to show you before I start talking about going through the assignment document. This document that's on the, let me just quickly write this down here so that there is a record of it in the chat. The due date is the 9th of October. And this document on the screen is called the lesson plan. So the file name, when it's uploaded, look for the file name with lesson plan, and you'll know that it's this document that's on the screen now. And I hopefully, hi Norman, nice to see you. You're not so late this evening. Luckily you've made it in time, Shane, because often you join the class quite late and then you've missed a bit. Okay, so this lesson plan, I try and include as much useful information as I am allowed to give you on the document, specifically to help you locate information in the textbook that is going to assist you with each of the questions. Because, and again, going back to my personal experience when I studied, I remember what used to take me the longest time was flipping through the textbook, and you knew you read something somewhere and you can't find it, and you waste so much time trying to find the relevant bits of information in the textbook. So that's my main purpose with this lesson plan, is to give you little heads ups as to, okay, go to this question, read this page, read this paragraph, do this example, with the things that will help you. So also just remember, in this lesson plan, it doesn't include everything. So don't think, okay, ma'am's given me, I must only do this and then that's enough for the assignment. It probably will be enough for you to complete the assignment, but it's not everything. Okay, so you must go out there and look for further information of your own, as well as what I've included on this lesson plan. You guys are familiar with what I usually put at the top here, and I am going to go over it again because obviously I do a lot of marking, and I'm finished all of the assignment ones now for all of the modules that I do. And as per usual, there are many of these points that I've got here in blue that the students still, it's the most common places that students lose marks. So always allow enough time for you to complete your assignment that you can come back and check these points to make sure that you have covered all of these and you haven't let yourself down somewhere. One of the most important is this one here. Follow all instructions given in the required very carefully. Double check exactly what they're asking you, the wording of the questions. You've got to keep going back to it. Make sure you've understood exactly what they're asking you, and that as you write in your answer, you are staying on point. Don't get sidetracked with other things, lovely information that you found on the internet, and you start discussing something that's a lovely paragraph and it's very interesting, but it doesn't answer the question that was asked, okay? Because I can't give you marks, even no matter how beautifully you've written something, if you haven't addressed the question, or questions with a plural, because as I've said to you before, a lot of the questions, there are several parts to it where they say discuss this and use these examples and etc. And you must make sure that you have covered all parts of whatever they've asked. Show all workings, also very important, because if you've given me a wrong answer with no workings, then I have to give you a 0. But if you have written down the workings as to how you got to that answer, I can often give you certain marks because I can see you were on the right track with your thinking, even though your final answer was incorrect. Looking at the number of marks allocated to a question, this is so important, especially for the theory questions, to make sure that you don't write too much and you also don't write too little. And then a new one that I've added to this list is about ChatGPT or any of these AI text generators. All of the lecturers have noted now this semester, obviously in particular, that the students are using AI more and more to generate answers for them. And then a lot of them are just copying and pasting those answers that's been generated for them and plopping them into the assignment, giving the textbook as the reference, and then submitting that. So we're very familiar with what an answer generated by ChatGPT looks like, because there's a certain style and format that they produce answers in. So we can very quickly recognize, okay, this is not students' work, this comes directly from one of these AI generators. So the reason that it's not acceptable to do that is from a plagiarism and a referencing point of view. Unless you really know how to use ChatGPT, and I'm not going to give you any clues, it doesn't give you references for the answers that it generates. So you are not allowed to plonk a whole bunch of information in your assignment without referencing the proper reference as to where that information comes from. And that's the main problem that we've got. We don't have a problem that you're using a search engine as such to find information. It's the fact that you can't reference it, and therefore it makes that plagiarism. And you know, you guys signed that declaration at the beginning to state, I declare this is all my own work, and you sign it. So we are justified in deducting marks if you are doing this, because we can pick up that it's not your own work. Okay, so I know that's not a very pleasant subject, but it must be addressed because it has become so rife across all modules. So just be aware of that. So yes, and Norman, you are correct. If you do use something to generate answers for you, you can do that, but then use that to get some new ideas and then reword those ideas in your own words, and then find that information somewhere where you can then reference it correctly if it wasn't your original thought in the first place. So in other words, we've just got to learn how to work with it correctly, rather than at the moment all the students are just, and I can imagine if I was a student, I would think Christmas had also come early, if I could now just suddenly type my questions into some software and it would generate answers for me. And then also, I'm sure you guys have read a lot about ChatGPT and these others as well. They and they also have the disclaimer on their own screen to say that the answers that they generate are not always accurate. They can't vouch for the truth or accuracy of the answers, because remember, all ChatGPT is using is all that information that's dumped on the internet by anybody everywhere. It's trawling through all that information that's out there, and it's using that. So it could very well be returning all kinds of dumb answers that are not true, because it's got no way of assessing whether it's true or not. Yeah, Wikipedia, although I'd probably have more faith in Wikipedia than I would have at this point in ChatGPT, purely because Wikipedia does reference. I don't know if you've ever used it. Everything in there is referenced and peer reviewed, whereas ChatGPT is not referenced and it's not peer reviewed. Okay, I don't know if you guys have ever, I think I've seen this reference in a lot of your with Investopedia. That's actually a very good, I don't think it's the same people that do Wikipedia, but Investopedia is a very nice website to use for finance questions. Yeah, I'm sure it comes up a lot, and in Learn we reference it a lot, and I've seen it in students' assignments as well. So you guys, the reason I'm taking some time to discuss this, because you guys are third years now, so we have to be very strict with you, because if you guys go on to do your honours next year, that whole honours year is research based, and they are going to be super strict on issues like this, and you're going to have to learn how to work with them if you do want to go on and get your honours. Okay, so that's enough blah about all of that, but this is all important information. And then please, your assignment must be submitted as a PDF document. So when you've completed your Word document and you're happy that everything is correct, export it to a PDF document and you upload the PDF document. I think for your group for assignment 1, there were at least 10 students that uploaded Word documents. So even my first years aren't doing that anymore. So always, that just shows you, as finance and accounting students, the most important thing that you've got to do is learn to pay attention to instructions and pay attention to detail. You have to be so detail oriented if you want to do this kind of a job. And if you're missing a huge big instruction like that right up front, then I've got some concerns. Okay, so I just quickly want to show you so that you know what's going on this document when we go through the assignment document. What I've done, the same I did for your assignment 1, for each question, I've told you which learning unit it's from, I've given a little bit of background, and then for each part of the question, if it's relevant, I've told you where in the textbook to go and find which questions, which sections, which example numbers, etc. So while we're going through the question paper, just bear in mind that you will be given this document. You will have this document to print out and to use with you while you're doing the assignment. Question 2 is more calculation based, so there I've referenced more questions and examples. And then question 3 is also more calculation based, so I've also in that question referenced more examples and questions that you can use to go through. Whereas for your question 1, it's mostly theory based. So the references that I've given here are to which sections of the textbook to read, and mostly question 1, you're going to do your own research as well. Okay, so that document will be given to you, and you will have all of that information. So now I just want to go back to the assignment document, and then let's just have a look at the individual questions. So you guys can, I don't want that, can start there. Okay. Anybody got any questions? Anything you want to say? Anything you want to ask at this point? Who started the assignment? Anybody started the assignment? I know that assignment 2 seems to follow on very quickly from assignment 1. So especially with your module, your timing, I must admit, I've got sympathy for you. They're really keeping you guys on your toes. Yeah, that's obviously, you see, you've got other modules as well. Okay, so just do your best. And as I said, what did I say? 2 weekends left for you guys. Yeah, you've got 2 weekends left, this weekend and next weekend. And then your due date is a Monday. So unfortunately, by that Monday night, you've got to have it handed in. Okay, nobody else got any questions? Remember, guys, relaxed sessions. You can chat to each other in the chat box, or you can ask me questions, and I'll keep checking there. And then you can also open your microphone if it's easier to talk instead of type as well, if there's anything that you want to ask. Are any of you guys from the Western Cape that got flooded away this last couple of weekends? Oh, most of you from Joburg and Gauteng and KZN. I'm based in GQ, and we also had massive floods this weekend. So it still kind of feels a bit, oh, you've only had your first rain now. Well, I hope you guys get the rain, as much rain as we've had down here in the Western and the Eastern Cape. I'm actually sitting without water the last 3 days at home because the floods were, the water volumes were so bad that they've washed away pipes and stuff in my neighborhood. So we're waiting for the municipality to fix that. Oh yeah, there's nothing like those first spring rains after the end of winter. It's absolutely the best thing. Exactly. Oh, you were okay in Blouberg. I'm not that familiar with all the areas in Cape Town. But sure, I've watched quite a few of those videos on YouTube. It's super hectic. Okay, so then let's just take a run through the actual questions themselves. And again, it's just to help you unpack the question to make sure that you've understood the question. That's very important. So before you even start writing or start doing your research, you're going to take your highlighter and a notebook and you're going to unpack the question so that before you start doing your research, you know exactly what it is that you have to talk about and answer. That's the most important thing to do before you start. So with this, oh, why did it change? Oh, it's because I've changed documents. With question number 1.1, they are wanting you to talk about current liabilities. So let's go and check the required first. I always like to read the required first before we then read the case study or the scenario, so that again you know what you're looking for. So I've read through the required of this assignment, and quite a few of them are quite wordy, which does make them a little bit difficult to really get to the crux of exactly what they're asking. So that's why I'm saying just break the required, break it down and be very careful. So they want us to discuss, so we know, okay, theory question. What do they want us to discuss? Number 1, they want us to discuss the importance of, and number 2, they want us to discuss the role of current liabilities. Okay, so that's kind of like the nucleus of what they're asking us. What is the importance and the role of current liabilities in the financial health of a company? Okay, that's the main question. And then this one over here is more kind of a hint. It's not part of the question. They're giving you a hint to say, use this as a direction to go into to answer what we've asked you in that first sentence. You may include the elements of working capital. You can include the management of working capital, and you can include the impact of current liabilities on the health of a company in your answers. So they're giving you a little bit of, because this first sentence is very broad, so they're giving you some direction so that you can hone in on exactly what you're going to ask. So also just remember some of our terminology. When we use the term working capital, what are we referring to? When we just say working capital. And remember, a lot of what you're doing in some of these questions here, you are going to refer back to your second year finance work, particularly Learning Unit 2, which is on all of the ratios and measuring and analyzing. So I'd highly recommend you first go back and reread Learning Unit 2 from 2 if you've still got that textbook. The amount that is used for the day-to-day operations of the company, yes, it is. And what general ledger accounts are included when we talk about working capital. And what I'm looking here for as opposed to net working capital, because really in this question, they say here you may include elements of working capital in your answer, but they really should say, let me just get this to the right text size, they really should say, be referring here to sorry, that's not going to work. Why is that coming up? Net working capital. What's the difference between working capital and net working capital? Can you guys remember? When we talk about working capital and where's my textbook? Remember when you are working out operating cycle as opposed to cash conversion cycle? The difference between between operating cycle and cash conversion cycle. Operating cycle is your working capital elements, and cash conversion cycle is your net working capital. Yeah, so working capital are your current assets. Okay, when we use the term working capital in its strict sense, those are all of your current assets. Whereas net working capital is your current asset minus your current liabilities. Okay, so please make sure that you understand that, because again, as I say, when you're reading these sentences, you must know what they're referring to when they use the different terminology. Okay. So at the top here, they've said current liabilities are typically settled using current assets, which are assets that are used up within 1 year. And current assets include cash or accounts receivable, as well as your inventory, which is accounts receivable, we know that. And the ratio of current assets to current liabilities is an important one. What do we call that ratio? Current assets versus current liabilities, or current assets over current liabilities. What do we call that? Yes, the current ratio. And what's the quick ratio? Can you remember how to work out the quick ratio? What's the difference between the current ratio and the quick ratio? Anyone remember? When we work out the quick ratio, yes, it's current assets excluding inventory, because we don't know how long it's going to take us to turn that inventory over, and so we exclude it to get a quick ratio. Okay. Okay, good. Everybody's kind of, so the reason I'm going over these things is I'm trying to kick your thinking back along the lines of no, you shouldn't be surprised. This, as a financial management and accounting students, this should all be second nature to you now. Okay. And what kind of ratio do we call that? Remember from second year when we are doing interpretation of our financial statements, there are 5 different categories of ratios that we can work out that will tell us different stories about our company. So where does the current ratio and the quick ratio fall? In which category of ratios do they fall? What story are we trying to tell about our company when we're working out current ratios and quick ratios? What is it that we want to understand? Profit. You're on the right track, because one of our ratios, I can see your brains going back to second year. So when we want to understand the profitability of the company, there are certain ratios that we calculate. But yes, we want to assess the company's ability to pay their short-term debt. So we want to know, how is the liquidity of the company? Remember your liquidity ratios. So Rosanna, you thinking of the profitability ratios, which are gross profit margin and those types of things. Yeah, but you're on the right track. Okay. Okay, so now you know what I'm bringing your thinking. So you know here you want to talk about the liquidity of the company, current assets versus current liabilities, and etc. So you need to know what story you're trying to tell about the company, so that when you discuss the importance and the role of current liabilities in the financial health of a company, you know that you are then going to be discussing really the financial health of the company in terms of liquidity. Does that make sense? It might have been a bit long-winded, but you can see if you just read this question, it can sound quite simple to start with, but you really have to understand what do they want you to understand about the company when you finished answering the question. And then remember, this is for 20 marks. So make sure that you've written enough for 20 marks, but also not pages and pages and pages. And I know it's very difficult to gauge exactly how much information to get for the 20 marks. And I don't have a memo. They don't give us the memos for these assignments until after you guys have handed in. So also I can't give you much more help with that, other than to just not so much a sentence as in a point or a fact. Does that make sense? So again, I often get students where they'll have some kind of a fact or a point, but then they will repeat that in different words in maybe over 4 different sentences, and you'll still only get 1 mark because it's the same fact that you're just repeating over and over again. So just make sure you are discussing all the different elements involved in that. And you'll find information on all of this, the management of working capital, the impact of current liabilities and the elements. You'll find information on all of that in your textbook, as well as all sorts of other sources as well. So because that question's for 20 marks, I did want to spend a little bit of time explaining it to you, so that you are on the right track with getting those 20 marks. Okay, and remember, if you're stuck while you're trying to sort out what information to include or not, you can always give me a shout, and then I can help you to decide whether that information is relevant or not. Okay, and then we've got any other questions about 1.1? Everybody okay with that for the time being? Okay. Then our 1.2 is for 15 marks, so not much less. And this one, again, if we go to the required section, they say provide some examples, and that's of policies, and that's of policies. Scratch out that or, it should be provide some examples of policies. So here you are going to have to come up with examples, and you are going to use examples in order to illustrate this statement, and as well you are going to discuss the impact on both liquidity and profitability. Okay, so we go back to go back to Learning Unit 2 from second year. Look at how do I measure the liquidity of a company? What ratios do I use if I want to measure the profitability of a company? Because that's going to be relevant. Because you can't discuss liquidity or profitability if you don't know how we measure liquidity and profitability. Okay, so you need to provide examples that will illustrate the truth or otherwise of this statement that they're giving us here. And then using those examples, then discuss their impact on liquidity and profitability. So what is the statement? The statement says that the policies that a company adopts with respect to paying its suppliers for goods and services can affect both its liquidity and profitability, and sometimes in the opposite directions. I don't know what that bracket's doing at the end there. Okay, so you're going to go and have a look at what are some of the policies that a company adopts as regards paying its suppliers. Conservative policies or aggressive policies. Okay, and how does the one versus the other, so you can give some examples of conservative policies, some examples of aggressive policies, explaining how each will affect the liquidity and the profitability of the company. And sometimes it will improve the liquidity, but what's the word, but negatively affect the profitability. And other policies might improve the profitability but negatively affect the liquidity. So that's what they mean by sometimes in opposite directions. So when we go through the lesson plan, you'll see I've given you a few pointers as to where you can go and look for information. But this is all in your textbook. But you can see from these questions, they've really given you really good questions that are going to get you to think and to really be able to explain in your own words and to show that you understand how these this management of current liabilities of a company actually works in real time in a real company. That's really what because we know that you guys can go and look up information and write nice paragraphs, but we're trying to test that you understand this and also to help you to understand it so that you can go and put these things into practice, obviously, in your working lives. Okay, any questions with this one? Do you guys understand what they're asking you there? Okay, and then 1.3, which is the last part of question 1, also for 15 marks. So these are quite heavy going questions. This question 1 is for a full 50 marks, which is half of the paper. So you need to pay attention to this first question. It's a really it is going to require some time and thought to get these get good marks for these. So then 1.3, again, if we go to the required, here they want us to explain by using descriptions of various scenarios. So that's quite similar to say provide some examples of. Here they're saying explain using descriptions of various scenarios. that could arise. How does a sentence read? Explain by using descriptions of various scenarios that could arise, okay, comma, how a negative working capital position might arise, comma, and the impact that this might have on a company. Okay. So this requires you to understand the definition of or explanation of what negative working capital is. How do we calculate whether working capital is, and again here they're talking about net working capital actually. How negative working capital might arise. What's the calculation? Who can hazard a guess? Negative working capital position. What would your formula be? Or which of our formulas would we use that would tell us? So sometimes our working capital would be positive, sometimes our working capital would be negative. So which of our formulas tells us whether our working capital is negative or positive? Remember, your working capital is our current assets and current liabilities. So how do you think we would arrive at negative? Yes, current assets minus current liabilities. And what would make working capital negative? Yes. Everybody understand that? If your current liabilities are higher than your current assets, then your net working capital has become negative. So that's the scenario that we're looking at. And in some businesses, it's quite normal to have a negative working capital. So it's not always like horrors, this is now going to be a disaster. Again, remember, it always depends on your particular industry that you're in, what type of business you run. Sometimes they can have negative or close to negative working capital as a normal state of affairs. But again, this is to show that how do you understand various scenarios. So you would include that in various scenarios. Different types of businesses. Which types of businesses would have a negative working capital? And how would that work and what would that impact have on the company? Okay, does that make sense? And so the statement that they've given us for 1.3 is negative working capital. So we know what that is now. Is closely tied to the current ratio, and we understand that because the current ratio says current assets versus current liabilities, which is calculated as a company's current assets over current liabilities. So current ratio is current assets over current liabilities. Negative or positive working capital is current assets minus current liabilities, or the ratio as well, because obviously if your ratio of current assets, if your current assets ratio is less than 1, then your working capital would be negative. Okay. So my real job that I wanted to do with these questions here in question number 1 tonight was just to make sure you really understand, break down these questions so you understand what part of the business you're talking about so that your answer can really address the particular issue that they've chosen in the question. Eskom is a perfect working example of a negative everything. I think everybody would probably agree in South Africa at the moment. Gosh, I wonder where all their working capital's going, Norman. Where would you hazard a guess? We're not, I suppose I better shut up. We're not allowed to talk about politics in our lectures. Oh dear. Okay, so when we had our NSS, not our NSS, our collab, our last collab, which was, I should give you the date so you know you can go and look up the recording, the 20th of September. So that was only last week. I did cover assignment 2 as well. Yes, exactly. Filled lots of pockets. Collab from the 20th of September also covered assignment 2. So for please listen if you haven't already. And the reason that I started talking about assignment 2 last week was so that I had plenty of time to go over all of the questions in the assignment, because otherwise it takes an awful long time in an NSS session. So if you remember, on the 20th, I concentrated on question 3, and I didn't address question 1 or question 2. So this evening, I am talking more about question 1 and question 2, and not so much about question 3, because we've already, if you go back to the 20th collab, you'll have the discussion on question 3 there. Okay. But obviously all the questions are included in the lesson plan that I'm going to give you tonight. Okay, so that's question 1, which is a huge question. I'm glad I don't have to write all of that. Question 2 is going to be a little bit of light relief for you after finishing off question 1. It's really just some simple calculations, all of which you will find examples of in the textbook, and I've given you examples and question numbers that you can, and sections in the textbook that you can refer to very easily and quickly find the information for question 2. So this should be an easy 20 marks that you can get. You shouldn't have any trouble with this. There's very clear examples in the textbook that you can follow. So let's just have a look at again what is the required, and they've just reminded and they put it in bold and underlined. And why do you suppose the developer who wrote this paper did that? Because they know that students are not going to do this. Even though we say please round to 2 decimal places, the students will probably, half the students won't do that. So take note of all the instructions. So the question that we have to answer is, if our company is also able to obtain a loan from Growth Bank, up here they say our company is considering taking out a bank loan of 425 from Wealth Bank, so that's our bank number 1, and then they give us the terms of the loan from Wealth Bank at the top here, and you're going to use this information at the top to calculate ultimately the EAR, effective annual interest rate of this particular loan. Okay. Then they say there's a second bank, Growth Bank, and they just give us the EAR. You don't even have to calculate it for the second bank. They say the effective annual interest rate is 25.5%. And then they say advise the directors as to which bank's offer they should accept and why. Okay, so which bank and why have you chosen that particular bank? So the important thing here is we are taking out a loan. In other words, we are borrowing money from the bank, which means that any interest that we are paying is going to be an expense in our books. You always have to look at the question. Am I the lender of the money? So is the interest income for me, or am I the person borrowing the money? Then the interest is an expense for me, because that's going to, and you've got no idea how many students will get this the wrong way around because they've misread, am I borrowing the money or am I lending the money? Okay, so I'm really, there's not much more I can tell you about this question here. Just remember, they've given you the total amount of the loan. It's going to be for 75 days. The only thing that they didn't give in this question is they didn't tell you, usually they're supposed to tell us how many days in a year we should use. So use 365 days. That information should have been included. So they're going to borrow the money for only 75 days. The bank charges an interest rate at a lending rate of 15% per annum. So remember that 15% is going to be our nominal rate. And that is 9% higher than the current prime rate. So you can, from that information, you'll work out what is the prime rate. And then in addition to the interest that they're charging, they are also going to charge commission, okay, which is an extra fee on top of the interest on any advances made. And the commission is calculated at a rate of 1/3 of the prime rate. So you have to use these two percentages here to calculate prime, and then take 1/3 of prime, and that's your percentage commission, which is then an extra expense that the company is going to incur in taking out the loan. So they haven't told us anything else other than that the loan is 425,000. So we will assume that the advance made by the Wealth Bank will be for the full 425,000. So remember, with your interest rates, so I'm just looking for some information. Where did I wrote something down? With interest rates, we have got a nominal interest rate, and that is the interest rate that is mentioned by the bank as saying, I'm going to charge you 10% per annum for this loan, or in this case, I'm going to charge you 15% per annum for the loan. That's the nominal rate, nominal meaning the named rate. Then and that rate is always per annum. It's 15% if I borrow the money for a whole year for all 365 days. So when we don't borrow the money for the entire year, we're only borrowing it in this case for 75 days, we then calculate the rand value of the interest, and using that we calculate the simple interest rate. And then if we've got additional charges like admin fees or commission, we have to calculate the effective rate, and take note that's the effective rate, just effective rate. And then we have to take the effective rate and convert it into an annual rate, so that we can then compare Bank A with Bank C, with Bank D, with Bank E. Effective annual rate, which is what our formula known as EAR. So just make sure that when you are working with interest rate questions like this, that you understand each of those terms. What's the nominal rate and what does it mean? When you calculate just the rand value of the interest, which will be the interest that I'm going to pay only for 75 days, because I'm only borrowing the money for 75 days, that is then the rand value of the interest, and I use that rand value to calculate the simple interest rate, which means I haven't converted it to an annual rate. It's just literally my interest cost as a percentage of the loan. And then the effective rate is when I take my interest that I am paying and I add to that any other commission or admin fees, and that new expense, total expense, I then work that out as a percentage of the money that I'm borrowing, because that's then my real cost that I'm incurring. And once I know what that percentage is, I can then convert it to an annual rate by using the EAR formula. should have opened my square brackets, but I didn't. Okay, that is all in your textbook. So that's your EAR formula. Anybody got any questions, any comments on question 2? Everybody happy with that? This is it. There are, if you're not careful, this is why I'm explaining all of these interest rates. If you're not careful, you can get muddled up with these interest questions. They sometimes do look more simple than they are if you're not familiar with all of the different terms and each calculation you need to do in successive order to get to the correct answer. Okay, so you're going to calculate the EAR for the Wealth Bank loan, and then you're going to compare that to the 25.5% EAR for the Growth Bank loan. Compare the two, and then you'll decide which of the two is more beneficial for your company, and you must be able to explain why you've chosen that one. Okie dokie. So then that only leaves question 3, which is for 30 marks. And I'm not going to spend time on this one now tonight because I did already cover this last week. Again, this is a little bit similar to the way they've asked question 2, where you've got 2 banks with 2 different loans and you're comparing them and then deciding which one is more beneficial. In question 3, we are assisting a company in analyzing their investment in working capital during 2022. Okay, so this question is going to involve working out your operating cycle formula and your cash conversion cycle formula. And they give you some information here that you are going to use to calculate some variables that they haven't given you in the question. So remember, they always give us clues, and some of the information that we need, we have to use the clues that they've given us to work out the RAND values that we need. So that's what this information here in this little paragraph is for. And I discussed this last week where they've told you that we've got a 25% markup on cost. And remember, markup is just another term for profit. And here they've told you that your gross profit achieved in 2022 was 8.5 million. So we then know that this 8.5 million is 25% of cost, because they told us we did achieve that. We did manage to achieve that markup. So that's the clue for you. The company's total annual investment in working capital is 16.250 million. So again, just to clarify terminology, when they talk about total annual investment in working capital, that means over the course of the full 365. That's my alarm, Norman. It's like my little, I've got little timers set to tell me so I know how much longer I can still talk for before I've bored all of you to tears. Total annual investment, that is the amount of money we have invested in our working capital over the entire 365 days in the year. In some of the questions that you'll see, they also talk about another, I think we've got this here further on. Let me just go over the page. When we are talking about the RAND value required to support the cash conversion cycle, that is only going to be a portion of that 17 and whatever, what was it? It's only going to be a portion of that 16.25 million. Because our cash conversion cycle, remember, is our number of days that it takes for our working capital to basically turn over. Remember, cash conversion cycle is operating cycle minus current liabilities. And operating cycle is your two current assets measured in days added together, inventory days plus accounts receivable days. That's your operating cycle, minus accounts payable days. That equals your cash conversion cycle. So that number of days in your cash conversion cycle is going to be hopefully quite a lot less than 365 days. So just make sure that you've got that clear in your mind. So we want to know how much of the 16 million that we used over the whole of 2022 was employed at any one time during the course of the year to support our cash conversion cycle. In other words, how much money was invested at a point in time in accounts receivable plus inventory minus accounts payable. Okay. Once you start working on this question, that will make more sense to you. So they've given you 2 years worth of information. You're going to have to calculate the cash conversion cycle for both years so that you can then again compare the amount of money that was invested in 2021 versus 2022. And the question that they say right at the end is that advise whether in 2022 their decision to sell and buy more on credit would have had a positive or a negative effect on profits compared to 2021. So the money that we've got invested in our cash conversion cycle, we always assume that we are using our overdraft to finance that investment in our net working capital. And so our cost of that money required to support the cash conversion cycle is the rand value required to support the cash conversion cycle multiplied by our overdraft percentage. I'm using the word overdraft, but you'll see in the question they'll say somewhere here you've got a cost of capital. Where is this? Somewhere here. At a cost of 8% per annum. Okay. So you're going to work out how much money did we require in 2021 to support our CCC, multiplied by 8% would equal the cost for 2021 versus the rand value required to support the CCC in 2022 multiplied by 8%, that will equal the cost for 2022. And then you'll compare those two costs. And if 2022's cost is higher than 2021, then your answer, and I don't know which way around it is because I haven't worked the final answer out myself, then you will then say, no, the policy, they changed their policies and it wasn't a good thing because the cost in 2022 is actually more than it was in 2021, or vice versa, whichever way the calculation comes out. Okay, so that's the calculation that you are aiming towards in question 3. And again, in the textbook, there's plenty of examples and questions that give you these calculations. They've just worded this question differently. You won't find this identical question in the textbook. They've worded it differently because they deliberately want you to understand all of the calculations so that you understand the question, and using what you know, you can then work out how they've worded the question in this question 3. Okay. Okay, guys, so I think I've bent your ears enough for one evening. Anybody got any questions about question 3? Anything that that you're not sure of with question 3, or any of the other questions for that matter? I know it's a lot. And as I say, I'm expecting question 2 and question 3 to go quite quickly. Hopefully, shouldn't take you very long. They're calculations, so you get lots of marks here because the marks are all for the calculations, and the same over here. Whereas question 1, so these two together make up 50 marks, whereas your 50 marks for question 1 is all about getting the correct facts and discussions and points and arguments down correctly for question 1 to get those 50 marks. Okay, everybody happy? Oh, shame, Tabogo, you're just joining now and we're just about to finish. Tabogo, we're finishing off now, but I've recorded the whole session, so I will upload it tomorrow for you and you'll be able to go through it. And just a reminder for all of those others that also joined later, for your support for this assignment, you must listen to your recording of the collab from September the 20th. That was a week ago, because we covered a lot in that. We covered a lot of assignment 2 in that session, as well as the whole of tonight's session as well. Okay. All right, guys, no more questions from anybody? And remember, you can send me a message at any time if you think of something. Then I will leave you in peace for the rest of the evening. So have a lovely rest of your evening and weekend. And then I will chat to you guys in the next collab, but no doubt I'll probably be chatting to some of you via messages in the meantime. Oh, thanks, Norman. I really appreciate that feedback. It really does make a world of difference to know that it's helping. Thanks, Kat. Okay, guys, have a lovely evening, and I'll chat to you guys again soon. Bye, guys. I'm going to stop the recording now.